of introducing and presenting to you our speaker for this afternoon. He is Dr. William Seraile, Professor Emeritus of African American History from Lehman College. In 1971, he was one of the pioneer scholars in the field of Africana studies. From 1963 to 1965, he did a tour in the Peace Corps in Ethiopia. This experience exposed him to the ancient kingdoms of Aksum and Lalibela. He earned a doctorate in American history from the City University of New York in 1977. He is the author of 5 books and has been a frequent guest on radio and cable television. He was a frequent guest on WLIB radio in New York during the 1980s and hosted a weekly history theme program for 18 months on Bronx Net television on Channel 68. He is a frequent host on Cultural Caravan television program on Channel 25 in New York. His scholarship and activism has resulted in numerous awards. I'll just mention one, including the prestigious Carter G. Woodson Scholars Medallion from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History in 2017. I introduce and present to you Dr. William Seraile.
I'm going to talk about several different topics here to lead up to where we are today. Briefly, I want to talk about slavery. I want to talk about the manumission society. And I want to end up with suggestions on how we expand the state celebration. American slavery was in all the 13 colonies, but it's different space to space. And it's different because of different religious groups that occupy this country. And that's why emancipation didn't occur at the same time throughout the country. So in New England, the dominant religious group were Puritans, and the Puritans believed in a type of slavery that was somewhat more logical and more human than other parts of the country. They kind of believed that people should be enslaved but only for a certain amount of time. And that's the reason why before 1800, all the states in New England abolished slavery. Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, so forth. Other parts of the country, like Pennsylvania, you had a lot of Quakers. Quakers were slave owners, but they came to the realization that slavery could not be compatible with being a Quaker. So the option was either you can be a Quaker or you can be a slave owner. You can't be both. And so that led to the end of slavery in Pennsylvania, but also it has great impact here in New York State. The rest of the country, you had a lot of Baptists, and Baptists kept the slavery going. You had Methodists, and a lot of Methodists decided slavery was wrong as well. And that's the reason why the Methodists divided themselves into Methodist North and Methodist South. And did not reunite until more recently because they fought over the question of enslavement of African people. Here in New York, in 1785, we had the Manumission Society. Now, who were these men? They were all white. Most of them were slave owners. They were all very prominent people. John Jay, who became governor and then later on became the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Aaron Burr, that we all know about because he shot and killed Alexander Hamilton. Gouverneur Morris, who was the signer of the Declaration of Independence. So these men were all very active in business and politics in the state of New York. And they decided to get rid of slavery, but only in a very gradual form. So from 1785 until 1827. Now these men didn't necessarily believe in equality, because they didn't think that men of color should be voters, and they didn't necessarily believe in what we call civil rights. So the question might be, why would slave owners be involved in trying to get rid of slavery? Well, it's hard to answer that question because without knowing what they really thought, but my thoughts are they believed that slavery was something that they could keep as long as they thought of their slaves and people, and someday might be able to have some degrees of freedom. We kind of know this because at that time in the 1780s, you had the American Revolutionary War. You had in England and France anti-slavery movements that were established. A lot of people thought slavery was going to be abolished because they didn't feel it was working economically. Cotton was there, so was tobacco, but it was very difficult to produce the cotton. Very time consuming to remove the cotton fibers from the cotton seed. And that's going to be later on going to change because of the cotton engine. But in the 1780s, there was a lot of questions about morality or immorality of slavery. George Washington owned slaves until the day he died. But George Washington said, quote, "There's not a man alive who wishes more sincerely than I do to see some farm enacted in this area of Virginia to get rid of slavery." So that was the sentiment he had, even though he still maintained ownership. Thomas Jefferson, who had slaves until the day he died, and only gave freedom to a handful, and they were all his children. He said, "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever." And he feared that one day there'd be an eruption like a fireball in the night. And many people said he was talking about the forthcoming war, the Civil War. And yet, he kept his slaves. So they had a conflict. They wanted the economic benefits of owning people, but they recognized the problem with having human beings as chattel. And so I think this is what motivated these men on the Manumission Society. We need to get rid of slavery, but maybe not quite yet. It's like saying I shouldn't drive my car because it's messing up the atmosphere and the climate and everything else, but it's kind of far to get up to the Hamptons or out to the Poconos, so maybe I'll get a car that'll be more efficient. So they're trying to compromise their beliefs, their principles. But anyway, they decided to get rid of slavery, and we saw the dates where they gradually came down to 1827. But also the Manumission Society in 1787 established what became known as African free schools. There were 5 in Manhattan. And these free schools educated some of the most prominent African Americans in our history. Among them is R. Aldrich. He's a very well-known actor of Shakespeare in Europe. Henry Highland Garnett, you saw his photograph on the screen. Henry Highland Garnett was a Presbyterian clergyman who, in 1843, called for a massive slave rebellion. So powerful were his words that at a convention of colored men, the words were so powerful they were not printed until 5 years later. Because he said,
go to your master and tell him you want to be free. And if he doesn't free you, then you kill him. And that was considered too radical, because at that time, most people in the abolitionist movement said, basically go to your master and tell him you want to be free and try to convince him about the reason why he should not be a slave owner. Now that may work for some people. It worked for someone who became known as Cassius Marcellus Clay, same name of Muhammad Ali. And Cassius Marcellus Clay in Kentucky, the slave owner, who changed his mind and decided that slavery should be ended. But most slave owners said, particularly after 1830, they stopped saying slavery is a necessary evil, something we have to have in order to go forward. They began to say slavery is a positive good. And by being a positive good, we're not getting rid of it. Now with the advent of the cotton engine in 1893, slavery is going to spread further west. And that's why it ended up in Texas. And that's why we heard about Juneteenth. Now what's important to know, besides the Manumission Society, you had our churches. Mother A.M.E. Zion Church, Abyssinian Baptist Church, and others were very instrumental in going forth trying to get people to understand slavery is evil. It should be abolished. And a lot of times you don't hear about their involvement, but if you pray every Sunday, someone's going to listen to you. and what was heard was slavery is evil and should be getting rid of. Now once slavery ended in New York, as I said, it didn't mean necessarily equality. All it meant was technically people no longer were owned by others. And that's the reason why we had, just before slavery ends in New York in 1827, we had the publication of Freedom's Journal, nation's first African American newspaper. John Rushmore and Samuel Carter. Now there's a school in Harlem by Harlem Hospital named for John Rushmore. He didn't stay in the United States very long because he believed in going back to Africa, which he did. Samuel Carter believed not only staying in America, but he began to say, we're not Africans, we are colored people, we are colored Americans. And that's why Carter started in 1837, Colored American newspaper. But the Freedom Journal in 1827, very first editorial, and it's located in Schomburg Library, the newspapers. The very first editorial that says something that is very relevant for us today. We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. Too long has the public been deceived by misrepresentations and things which concern us dearly. So basically saying, if we want anything done, do it yourself. We have to speak out for ourselves. Speak out in what areas? He says, speak out about our mistreatments, speak out about Africa, speak out about how other newspapers talk about us in terms that are not Christian, that are not beneficial to our development. And I spent a lot of time looking at newspapers in the 19th century, certainly today, and I like to analyze what I see sometimes. And I see more recently in New York Times, anything about Africa is always negative. There's a revolution, there's an overthrow, assassinations. I don't see very much about Africa in American public media that's not negative. And that's what John Rushmore and Samuel Carnes were talking about. Too long others had they misspoke about who we are. They didn't tell the truth about who we are. So again, it's up to us to do the same thing. What's important now is we have, after many, many years of going out for a program in churches, to have something to eat in the morning, to have prayers, and try to come out to have this day a day to commemorate. What is now needed is a day of a holiday. Because we can have a day like this, you still got to park your car on the right side of the street, otherwise you get fined. And I still have to go to work if you have a job that says come. Is that a holiday? And we see things go along very, very slowly. Because I remember with Bessie going 20 years ago, we had a program to say, let's have this going forward, and it went forward. Now today, I was earlier in Manhattan, program at Mother Amy Zion Church. There's a proclamation from the governor of New York about today. And I don't know if you're going to get a copy or not, but if you don't get a copy, you need to get a copy from Nash Alley. And that copy needs to be copied and then sent to local newspapers and local libraries and other places to spread the word. Because anything we think about, any movement, you have people who are there, who are very, very small in numbers, and they begin to go out and they begin to spread the word and begin to plant seeds. Now, seeds are people. So you have a program here today in Lincoln Hospital. Will there be a program in 5 years at Lincoln Hospital? It could be if you have some people here who work here who can begin to say, we'll take care of this next time. Because then that means people who are doing it right now, maybe someplace else, to spread the word as well. Now, there's a very strong possibility in 2027, which is the 200th anniversary of emancipation of slavery in New York State, that New York Historical Society will put on an exhibit. I had spoken with myself and Ellen Farabee, who's president of the Manhattan branch, SALA. We had spoken to a representative from the New York Historical Society who seemed very, very interested in doing something about an exhibit. Now that's really important because New York Historical Society had a program, some of you may have gone to it about 15, 20 years back, slavery in New York. It's the largest program they had for people to come out from the public to see it. Now, that's the New York Historical Society. They have a memory. Memory is people came, they spent money to get here, they spent money in here. So I think we're going to seriously think about doing something in 2027. Now, having a conversation a bit earlier, I understand perhaps the Bronx Historical Society may do something. Correct?
Correct.
Stand up.
Absolutely.
Take a photograph. Take a picture. You see it on the streets and you haven't done anything, you know what to do next. Anyway, see, that's important too because the Bronx Historical Society does something.
Right down the street.
See, you might have a display or a small exhibit or you have a speaker. And that's how you spread the word. Mm-hmm. If you have people go and leak some information, hopefully others get encouraged and they can do something.
Social media.
Now, I heard someone earlier, I don't know if she is back here somewhere, I think she was talking about working for the city. Where's that person? Department of Treasury or something?
Go back to work.
Is that person here?
You got the memo late. That's what happened.
No, there's someone I was speaking to when I first came. And she said that she went to Lehman College, we never took my class, but anyway. She said, I think she's working for the city treasury or something. And they had something a few years ago, a program for today. Well, anyway, see that if you work for a city, you have agencies. And that's a possibility you can establish something wherever you work because they're going to do it for Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
See, everybody's doing something for Juneteenth, and Juneteenth is very, very non-controversial. Mm-hmm. So you do it. That's why it's a state holiday around the United States. Mm-hmm. Because nothing controversial about it. So everybody can jump on that wagon because nothing to fear. So if you work for an agency, city agency or state agency, perhaps you can have something. It's nothing more than just saying, like some signs put up, and then that can go to something bigger and bigger. Now, I have a suggestion, and I don't have the means to do it myself, but I'm thinking about, we all seen advertisements for I Love New York. Now, why can't I Love New York have programs or apps that deal with abolitionism in the state of New York?
Oh, they have a thing.
No, if I Love New York, and then if you have a scene showing something that relates to abolitionism in New York, whether it's something like Cooper's Union, where you had Abraham Lincoln spoke, Frederick Douglass spoke, anti-slavery movements, whether it's location in one of the African free schools, whether it's the areas in lower Manhattan where slavery took place, the African burial ground, and so forth. And that could be part of the slogan, I love New York. Instead of having a waterfall, they can have something related to abolitionism. So now, if you know anybody who's in the area of advertisement, so you need to talk to these people about those kinds of things. The same thing is spread the word to all different kinds of libraries, particularly outside the city of New York. They're smaller because, see, smaller towns don't have anything going on, so they want something different. So if you have a town of 15 or 20,000 people, and they have in their library an exhibit, and you put out some books that deal with this time period of the early 19th century, and perhaps they can blow up some photographs and get off the internet, and you have a little sign saying Emancipation, July 4th, 1827, then people get curious and want to say, well, do you have any books about this? And they read more and more about it. So if you know people in other parts of the state where you have the local libraries or local historical society, you know other historical societies throughout the state?
Say that again?
You know other historical societies in New York State?
Oh, yeah, a few of them, yeah.
Okay, so I appoint him our ambassador to spread the word to, because it's important because, see, local historical societies put on events pertaining to their locale. Since slavery existed all throughout the Hudson Valley, since slavery existed in Albany and other major cities in New York State, those local historical societies would put on something, a program, an exhibit, a speaker. And that's how you spread the word, because if you go back 20 years ago, no one would ever think that a governor of New York would have a proclamation today.
That's right.
And she outlined the need why we have this day. Now the next step is to get her to say, I proclaim the second month of July to be a holiday.
Yes.
So that'll be the next effort. And then at that point, see, you can win.
Yes.
How does cash bail turn poverty into a crime? Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford to pay your bail, and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail is immoral and unjust. That's why the Bail Project helps those who cannot afford it while fighting to end cash bail, because freedom should be free.
So I'm going to stop here, but unless you have maybe a question or two, I'll answer. But if not, I'm not sure what you have else planned for the program today.
Why is it so hard to get legislators to, even when they act on it, let's say legislatively, when it comes to the next step of actually practicing what they initiated, it's like people are hesitant or... Because
legislators are like anybody else. If I'm going to get reelected, I don't care. If someone's going to challenge me and that person is strong enough, then I care. And I think that's what's going to be the next thing to do. See, Juneteenth came about because enough people spread the word who came out of Texas, because it was a Texas thing. I mean, I heard about Juneteenth years ago, but okay, that's Texas. But then people left Texas and they started taking Juneteenth celebrations on their own, like barbecues in the backyard, in Virginia and North Carolina and elsewhere. But it took the killing of George Floyd to get the nation sympathetic. And so they get Juneteenth in Mississippi, in Alabama, elsewhere. Some of this number of states have made it a state holiday because a holiday for the federal level just means if you work for the federal government, you don't work. Doesn't mean that everybody stays home. It's a holiday. But a state holiday means all the state workers stay home too.
And the city workers.
Yeah, the city. So if you had gradually Juneteenth became safe as a holiday, that there's no controversy involved. And so the lawmakers here, it did get pushed. And see, I think the governor is getting pushed because why would she issue today a statement about Abolition Day? She didn't have to, but she did. And definitely try to get a copy of what she said because that copy should be copied. It should be placed in libraries and other places. And as a result, see, since the governor did this, other people feel, oh, maybe it's safe for me to do something now. Other people in the state assembly. So that's how we can push it further and further to where we want. It's a holiday. Is there another question or not?
What are your recommendations to get the City University of New York, Lehman College, Edwards, all of the Africana Studies departments and Black Studies?
Yeah, I talked about that about 2 years ago, and I've been retired since 2007 from Lehman, so some people I know are gone now. But I tried that, and I didn't really get the connections I wanted to get. But I'm gonna try again because I do know the librarians is very helpful. And I'm pretty sure I can get the library at the college to put something on display. Maybe sometime like May or June instead of July. When students are still at the campus. They have a display because all you had to do is put a display and put out a number of books that deal with early part of the 20th century or 19th century, and maybe have some things like these signs you put up, and that way people walk by, they can see it. But I also would like the college to have maybe half a day where they can have a program of speakers and talk about the need, because the whole thing about 1827 and is that time period, you can deal with slavery, but also you can deal with civil rights discrimination. The state of New York was just as racist as the state of Mississippi when it came to not having civil rights. You had people who couldn't get on the public transports. If the weather's nasty, if they got on, they couldn't be on the shelter. You couldn't get on the steamboats. You couldn't go to an inn or to a hotel. You couldn't dine in certain places. That was the law in the state of New York. See, it wasn't until around the early 1870s that New York passed civil rights law.